Do you confuse spiritual confidence with self-confidence? Welcome to the Daily Devo. I am Vince Miller. This week we are in 1 Samuel chapter 17. I've titled the chapter Battling Giants because we battle a giant. So far we have the battle scene painted. In today's text, David approaches King Saul before running off into that battle. Let's see what they say to each other, beginning in verse 31. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "You're not able to go and fight this Philistine, for you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father." What a great start to a resume. "And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered him out of his mouth. And if he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." And David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." It's just kind of laughable, actually, when you think about it. He's essentially handing the kingdom over to David. Then Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David strapped his sword over his armor, and he tried in vain to go, for he had not tested them. Of course, they probably wouldn't have fit David very well, because remember, King Saul is one of the largest men in all the kingdom, tallest at least. Then David said to Saul, "I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them." So David put them off. He throws them onto the ground. He took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in a shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. And tomorrow we'll see what God's going to do here in this situation as we resolve who's going to win against the giant. But for today, 3 features of David's approach in this text that really captured me. Number 1, the first feature: God's man is bold but humble. Bold but humble. I mean, we see David's boldness. It's really quite striking if you can imagine it. We have to remember that this is a 15-year-old boy who's about to step into the octagon to fight a UFC champion in hand-to-hand combat. I mean, that's essentially what this is. And he is confident, David is confident that God's going to deliver him. But don't confuse his courage with secular understandings of self-confidence, like that kind of self-confidence your teacher tried to encourage you to have when you were in junior high school. That's not what we're talking about here. Don't ever wrongly correlate David's confidence with self-confidence, because that's not at all what this is. It's not even remotely the same. David's confidence is not born from himself. It's not, or moral virtue. It is born from faith and assurance in God and in God's power. You'll notice here that David doesn't even boast about his strength or abilities. Instead, what he is doing is recounting past victories over similar opponents like the giant Goliath, attributing all his success to God. And this blend of boldness and humility is what all believers need. We should never be overly inactive and camouflage that in meekness, or on the other hand, excessively active and camouflage that in arrogance. We have to find the right blend of boldness and humility, and David gets it right here because of his faith in God. He realizes that this has to do with God, not himself. Feature number 2, David understands that if God did it, then he's going to do it again. That if God did it then, he's going to do it again. You see, David has spiritual confidence that's rooted in some past experiences with God. And for David, this current moment is a continuance of the work of God done through him in the past. He believes that what God did back in the fields with the sheep, he's going to do on the war field with all these sheepish people. I hope you see the correlation there. It's so vivid. I mean, the picture is painted. Now, most of us, we fail to remember this, and there is a reason why. The reason why is this, is when God delivered us in the past, we failed to see it as God's victory. We failed to see it as God's victory. Therefore, in the present situations, we put all these unrealistic pressures on ourselves and fail to act. And guys, you have to stop seeing past victories as your victories or just coincidences. If you see them as God's victories, then that same victory will carry into future successes because you see and give glory to what God is doing. If you don't do this, you will never have the strength for the present battle and the victory that God wants you to know in the present, because God has been preparing you just like he was preparing David. You have a battle, and so does David. David got it right, and we sometimes get this wrong. So get it right. Feature number 3 is this: God's logic defies human logic. God's logic always defies human logic. Now, the way that David approaches the battle defies for me conventional wisdom or logic. Instead of sporting Saul's armor and carrying his sword, which would have been standard for a battle like this, David opts for a familiar staff, sling, and a few stones. That's it. A staff, a sling, and a few stones. His choice may seem irrational from a human perspective and human logic, but it highlights a key feature of David's faith. Faith in God results in responses that sometimes defy human logic, or at least look like they do. While it may look humanly irrational at this moment in time in this battle, it's spiritually perfectly rational, and David sees it that way. And when bold faith is required, you have to go back to what God has done before in feature number 2, and then use the same tools of faith again in what appears to be a slightly different situation. And guess what? When we do that, it's going to bother some people because to onlookers, it may look illogical, but we all know it's perfectly logical. So 3 features of David's approach here. Number 1, he behaved bold but humble. Number 2, he believed God was going to do it then and would do it again. And 3, he believed God's logic defies human logic. So the question I have for you today, as you reflect on David's story, is what do you need to change in your approach to today's challenges? What do you need to change in your approach to the challenges that you're going to face today? And remember, spiritual confidence is not self-confidence. I love you guys. I pray this bless you. If it has, share it with someone else, and I'll see you right back here again